So today being 16th of January, Ajahn Chah Memorial Day, I'll do a reading about Ajahn Chah. And I'm going to read from Stillness Flowing, the biography, the life and teachings of Ajahn Chah, compiled by Ajahn Jayasaro. So some of the reading will be Ajahn Jayasaro's narrative, and some will be quotes from Ajahn Chah's teachings, combination. And also, I was asking Luang Por his opinion about what readings might be appropriate for a day like this, and he thought maybe some of the the readings from this book related to the actual practice and teachings. So I have a selection of those, and also have invited Luang Por to just interject comments anywhere along the line, and keep some time available afterwards for some reflection, since he's our main living connection to someone who spent time with Ajahn Chah, much time with Ajahn Chah actually, particularly the latter years of his life. So this is from the section called A Well-Rounded Training. It starts on page 450 for people who might want to take a look at it. One of the foundations of Buddhist practice is the conviction that purposeful effort has meaning. The Buddha rejected the beliefs that human life is determined by a divine will or fate or randomness. He proclaimed that human beings created their own life and environment by the quality of their actions of body, speech, and mind. Luang Por's teachings express this right view again and again. Monks were to take responsibility for their lives through their own consistent efforts. They all had the potential for liberation within them. The question was whether they had the determination and the patient endurance to realize that potential. Don't just sit, this is Ajahn Chah, don't just sit there waiting for Nibbana to come to you. Have you ever seen anyone successful in that way? Wherever you see you're in the wrong, then quickly remedy it. If you've done something incorrectly, then do it again, properly. Reflect on experience. There was no alternative to hard work. Some people become monks thinking that they'll be able to take it easy and enjoy life. But if you've never learned to read, you can't just pick up a book and start to read it. Some people come here to become monks in order to find happiness. But what does happiness arise from? What is its cause? Hardship must come first. Don't you have to work before you have the money to buy food? To farm the land before you get rice to eat? Hardship precedes happiness. One phrase in particular monks heard again and again over the years. Eating little, sleeping little, talking little. These are the actions of the practitioner. Eating a lot, sleeping a lot, talking a lot. These are the actions of the fool. Okay, the next section is titled Patipada. Monks often take on special observances in order to get out of a rut or in the hope of accelerating their practice. At the very least, by doing so, they exercise powers of diligence, vigor, and renunciation, all of which are important qualities for monks to cultivate. However, Luang Por would remind those of his disciples prone to putting their faith in radical but unsustainable asceticism to look closely at the intention behind their undertakings. A short period of heroic effort, followed by a longer lazy period of recuperation, was not, he insisted, a wise or effective strategy for dealing with defilement. Craving for results too easily infected a mind set up in this way. For him, the key to success was patipada, steady, consistent, continuous practice. The tortoise rather than the hare. Don't pay any attention to whether you're feeling diligent or lazy. Normally, people do things when they feel diligent and stop when they feel lazy. But as monks, that's not how we conduct ourselves. Whether we feel lazy or diligent, we practice. We have no interest other than cutting things off, in abandoning them, in training ourselves. We are consistent day and night, this year and next, at all hours, indifferent to feelings of laziness or diligence, hot or cold. We just keep doing it. This is called patipada. Sometimes monks get really gung-ho and sustain it for 6 or 7 days. But when they see they're not getting anywhere, they give up. And then they really lose it for a while, chatting and socializing in a heedless way, until they come to their senses and put in another couple of days of hard effort. Then they give up again until the next time they feel inspired, and that becomes the pattern. It's like people who throw themselves into their work like there's no tomorrow, digging fields, clearing trees, clearing hillsides, and then when it's time to take a break, throw their tools down and walk off without putting them away. By the following morning, the tools are completely caked with mud. Then they get enthusiastic for the work again, and in the evening throw their tools down once more. This is not the way to prepare fields for cultivation, and it's the same for our practice. If you don't think patipada is important, you'll have no success. Patipada is absolutely vital. Making fire was another of Luang Por's favorite analogies for this principle, one that allowed him to perform a favorite short pantomime. As he spoke, and with a big smile on his face, he would mime the fool who rubs 2 sticks together until he becomes tired or bored, puts them down for a while before picking them up once more, expecting to carry on from where he'd left off. Finally, he gives up altogether and compounds his error by insisting that he knows from experience that it's not possible to get fire from wood. There is fire there, Luang Por said, but you're only going to produce it if you keep rubbing the sticks without interruption until the critical temperature has been reached. In the same way, practice can only bear fruit when it is developed in a similarly steady manner. Short bursts of effort, no matter how intense, cannot create the necessary momentum. A fisherman casts his net and catches a huge fish. He becomes afraid that the fish is going to jump out of the net and get away. He becomes so anxious, he grabs at the fish wildly, struggles to get a grip on it. Suddenly, just as he feared, the fish is out of the net. But it escapes because his own efforts to grasp hold of it are too violent. There's an old saying, gently, gently does it, but not too gently. That's our practice. Keep feeling things out, feeling them out. Don't give up. You have to look at the mind, understand what it's all about. Try to keep doing the practice, making it consistent. If you're feeling lazy, do the practice. If you're not feeling lazy, do the practice. That's the kind of continuity that's needed. He often repeated that the craving to get something or become something would always sabotage even the most determined effort. The Buddha taught that putting forth effort is for abandonment, for letting go, for withdrawing from attachment. There should be no desire for becoming in birth, to get or to be anything at all. This effort was to be constantly monitored and tweaked, the goal being a balanced level called pawdi, just right. Putting forth effort that moment by moment was maintained at the optimum intensity for achieving one's purpose. Luang Por defined as right practice. Putting forth effort is not restricted to a particular posture. You can do it while standing, walking, sitting, and lying down. You can realize Dhamma while sweeping leaves, or merely looking at a sunbeam. It is essential that mindfulness be constantly primed. Why? Because when you are intent on discernment of the truth, there are opportunities to realize the Dhamma at all times and in all places. This section is called Knowing Now. Luang Por often said that the present moment encompasses everything. It includes past and future because it is the result of the former and the cause of the latter. For this reason, developing the ability to dwell with clarity in the present moment is perhaps the most fundamental of all meditation skills. However, Luang Por said that the value of it did not just lie in the lucid calm that resulted from letting go of memory and imagination. It was in the present moment that wisdom could also be cultivated. In Dhamma practice, all you have to do is keep looking at the present moment. Look at the instability, the impermanence, and Buddha knowing will arise and grow. Keep seeing the truth of all things, that they are impermanent. Pleasure and pain arise, and they're impermanent. It's unsure how long they'll last. If our mind sees the uncertain duration of things, the problem of attachment will gradually diminish. The past was gone, the future had not yet arrived. Suffering, its cause, its cessation, and the path towards its end all lie in the present moment. The practice of staying in the present is mental cultivation. To put it simply, we must be mindful, have a constant awareness and recollection, knowing what is occurring right now, what we're thinking, what we're doing, what's going on with us. We must look at our mind, constantly mindful of our mood, our thoughts, whether we're experiencing pleasant or unpleasant feelings, whether we are in the right or in the wrong. Reflecting, investigating in this way, the wisdom faculty has already manifested. The eyes see a form, the ears hear a sound, the nose smells an odor, the tongue experiences a flavor, the body a touch. Whatever is felt is known. Whether we think something is good or bad, we like it or dislike it, it's all impermanent, unsatisfactory, and not self. The Buddha taught us to put these things down, not to grasp onto them. This is called solving problems. In the last 5 or 6 years of his teaching career, most of Luang Pa's Dhamma talks were recorded on audio cassette. In this collection of talks, now stored digitally, Luang Pa deals with a wide variety of themes, among which one frequently repeated teaching stands out, that of Maine. The phrase Maine translates most readily as unsure, uncertain, changeful, or indefinite, and is an everyday term that all of Luang Pa's audience would have immediately understood. And then Ajahn Chah also has a footnote here. The Pali word closest to the idea of Maine is viparinama, usually rendered in English as subject to change. A farmer, for example, asked in the planting season whether he expected to get a good harvest that year, would most probably reply, Maine. If we get enough rain, it should be all right. The phrase Maine here is a simple recognition that things are affected by many variable conditions and are thus never completely predictable. Luang Pa taught his disciples to practice the perception of Maine as a means of cultivating the wisdom faculty. By constantly reminding themselves that both internal and external phenomena were Maine, they developed anicca sanya, the perception of impermanence, and with practice, the associated perception of dukkha, the inherently flawed, ultimately unsatisfactory nature of experience, and anatta, the conditioned, selfless nature of experience. These perceptions of the three characteristics of existence created a pathway for vipassana, the deep worldless insight that uproots defilements and leads to the end of suffering. The practice of Maine achieves its power from directly confronting the ingrained tendency of unawakened beings to invest experience with the appearance of solidity. This sense that the things within and without us are real and substantial is founded upon unexamined assumptions. The perception of changefulness became the tool Luang Pa most often recommended to challenge these assumptions. Luang Pa chose to use the phrase Maine in preference to the more traditional anicca, or impermanent, to bring a fresh slant on wisdom development. For his disciples, Maine was a familiar, approachable idea, deeply embedded in the culture. It demystified Dhamma practice and made it immediately practical. The specific emphasis of the Maine practice may be examined by comparing it to the comparable phrase, this too will pass. Whereas this too will pass reminds us of a future beyond the present experience and so puts it into perspective, Maine points to the nature of the present phenomena itself. In daily life, Luang Pa taught that the Maine reflection was particularly effective in dealing with attachment to ideas and views. In this context, the word might be better translated as maybe not. Whenever the mind was about to draw a conclusion or jump to one, when it was about to make a judgment about something, he taught the meditator to recall, maybe not. Maybe that's not how it is. Maybe that's not how it happened. Maybe that's not what he or she is really like. Whenever the sense of certainty arose, meditators were to temper it with a gentle, maybe not. Even if they were convinced, they were still to reserve a small space in their mind for the possibility of being wrong. Yes, but maybe, just maybe, not. In this way, the mind was to become more careful and nuanced in its attitudes. Luang Por gave this practice the greatest importance. Manea is the Buddha himself, he would say. It is the Dhamma. He taught that the recollection of Manea, both as a means of re-educating a person's attitude to their life, and also as a specific technique in meditation. As hindrances arose in the course of a sitting, he would encourage the meditator to recognize the hindrance as Manea, or changeful, before returning to the breath. As the mind became more subtle, this accumulated perception of Manea, that whatever arises does not endure, is an exercise of the wisdom faculty that ensures that the mind does not fall into the trap of attaching to joy or to stillness, and is primed to develop vipassana. When you see impermanence clearly, you become a true monk. Seeing the impermanence, the instability of form, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness, the mind does not attach to the five aggregates. It doesn't matter what it is. Even if something happens that upsets you so much that tears are forming in your eyes, remind yourself, this is Manea. Always bear this in mind with your sati, with your alertness. Whether you feel satisfied, dissatisfied, think this is good, this is bad, see it all as Manea, and you can release the attachment. When you see things as ultimately without value, the letting go occurs automatically. Don't forget this word. Don't let it drop. The Buddha taught us not to grasp to the good or the bad. Whatever arises, pool your resources in this word. It is the source of wisdom and the object of vipassana. Make it your constant focus of attention. It will take you beyond doubt. Manea is a tool to uproot attachment to experience. It will enable you to see the Dhamma clearly. One of the means by which Luang Por sought to inculcate this principle in his disciples' minds was by maintaining an element of unpredictability in their daily lives. Changes would be introduced to the monastic schedule without prior warning and with no indication of how long they would last. A monk preparing for the annual rains retreat at Wat Pah Bong might be told a day or two before it began that he would be doing the retreat elsewhere, that he should gather his things together, clean up his kuti, and be ready to leave within the hour for a monastery hundreds of kilometers away. It was a style that kept monks on their toes, and it enabled Luang Por to create a singular atmosphere in his monastery, one in which the calming effects of simplicity and repetition were enlivened by a sense that nothing could be taken for granted. Ajahn Chah remembered how plans could change in a single moment. He'd say to me, "Get your bowl and robes. We're going to such and such a place." By the time I got back again with my things, he'd say, "Change of plan." This happened so often that I got a real feeling for Manea. Afterwards, I came to understand it to mean dividing things up 50-50, maybe, maybe not. I adopted it as my guiding principle in practice. Learning from nature. By founding his monastery in a forest, Luang Por was upholding a venerable tradition stretching back to the time of the Buddha himself. Almost every one of the monasteries established by the Buddha during the 45 years of his ministry were situated in wooded areas. While the settings for these monasteries varied considerably in wildness, ranging from benign fruit orchards to forbidding jungle thickets and mountainsides, they all shared certain features in common. And this is a quote from the Vinaya, Mahavaga. being neither too far nor too near a village, suitable for coming and going, accessible for those seeking what is profitable, i.e. Dhamma, not crowded in the day, quiet and still at night, possessing an atmosphere of solitude, undisturbed by people, suitable for seclusion. Since the time of the Buddha, monastics with minds liberated from defilements, able to live in any environment without mental suffering, have almost always chosen trees and silence over buildings and noise. It would seem that forests and lonely places are the natural habitat of the Arahant. One of the most surprising passages in the Pali Canon is the lyrical verse attributed to Venerable Mahakassapa, the great ascetic and probably the gruffest, most forbidding monk in the suttas. Like towering peaks of dark blue clouds, like splendid edifices are these rocks, where the birds' sweet voices fill the air. These rocky heights delight my heart. With glades refreshed by cooling rain, resounding with the calls of crested birds, the cliffs resorted to by seers, these rocky heights delight my heart. That's from the Therigatha. In the Buddhist understanding, the human relationship to sense experience, mediated by eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind, may best be conceived as addiction. The forest monastery in this analogy is akin to a rehab center. Just as these institutions are situated from the surroundings in which the patient's addiction flourishes, so too the forest monastery provides distance from worldly influences. Until the mind is strong, unnecessary exposure to triggers of addictive behavior needlessly jeopardize the efforts to free the mind. Luang Por would often refer to the three kinds of seclusion, viveka, mentioned in the texts. Physical seclusion provides the optimum supporting conditions for mental seclusion, i.e., the state of concentration, secluded from the hindrances. This, in turn, creates the basis for the ultimate seclusion from defilements. The Buddha taught that sound is like a thorn that prevents the mind from entering deep states of meditative calm. Forest monasteries provide a respite from the more invasive noises. Although in Thailand today, few are completely unaffected by the sounds of road traffic and village loudspeakers. And yet, Southeast Asian forests are by no means silent places. During the rainy season in particular, they throb with life. The same heat and humidity that humans can find so enervating seems to swell the exuberance of other creatures. The volume of noises they produce can be considerable. Bird song, the deep nighttime bellowing of bullfrogs following heavy rain. The gecko lizards, tuk gay, the chorus of cicadas piercing the dusk. These sounds are as familiar to forest monks as traffic noise is to an urban dweller. Strangely enough, forest noise, even in its most raucous, does not detract from the sense of peace in the monastery. It tends to be the associations evoked by sounds rather than their aural impact, A-U-R-A-L, aural, impact that disturbs the meditator. Luang Por once joked that whereas a newly ordained monk could hear birds singing at the tops of their voices in a tree outside his kuti and hardly notice it, the faintest sound of a female singer wafting into the forest from a village loudspeaker could turn his mind upside down. Luang Por encouraged his disciples to wake up to the simple truths that surrounded them. Nature is full of teachings for all of us. A wise person learns from the things around him in the forest, the earth, the rocks, the trees, the creepers. It's as if all these things were ready and willing to give us advice and teachings. When we consider it well, we'll see that forms, etc., are only our enemies because we still lack wisdom. In fact, they are excellent teachers. Liberation didn't lie in escaping from the world of sense objects, but in transforming the experience of them through wisdom. One year, Luang Por sent an Australian monk, Ajahn Chah, to spend the rains retreat in a branch monastery more than 150 kilometers away from Wat Pa Pong. During the retreat, Luang Por paid a visit. Luang Por: "How are you getting on, Jagaro? Why are you so thin?" I'm suffering, Luang Pa. I don't feel so good. What are you suffering about? Why are you unhappy? It's because I'm living so far from my teacher. What do you mean? You're living with 6 Ajahns. Isn't that enough for you? A look of puzzlement. Luang Pa says, Ajahn eyes, Ajahn ears, Ajahn nose, Ajahn tongue, Ajahn body, and Ajahn mind. These are your teachers. Listen to them well, watch them well, and you'll become wise. Often forest creatures would form the subject of homilies delivered to the Sangha, none more so than that of the forest chickens. Look at how spry the forest chickens are, how wary of danger they are. And they're no gluttons. The moment they become conscious of a threat, even while they're eating, they're away. These forest chickens are vigilant. They protect themselves, and they can fly high. When they sleep, they rest on tree branches and treetops, each one to himself. Not like domestic chickens. They eat a lot, they're heavy, they're ponderous, they can't fly high. They don't have their wits about them. Even if one manages to run off, it soon gets mauled by dogs. Domestic chickens get attention from human beings. They're looked after, and it makes them heedless. The forest chickens are different. They're alert and self-reliant. They go about their business without any fuss. They're punctual. Come rise or shine, even if it's bitterly cold, when it's time to crow, they crow. In fact, they're so reliable we use them as an alarm clock. They're consistent about their work, and they never demand any reward from anyone for doing it. They live at ease in nature. They don't seem to get attached to anything. It's almost as if they have their own kind of Dhamma practice. They don't think a lot. They're not inquisitive or doubtful. They don't look for things to stir up their minds. Okay, I think I'll leave it there and ask Luang Pa for maybe some pertinent memories, thoughts, reflections of time with Ajahn Chah.
Yeah, let's see what I can come up with. Also, people can ask questions as well, but a couple things. Just the incident with Ajahn Chah, just the relying on the senses and what came to mind was a monk who was living with Ajahn Chah, he was ordained somewhere else and he'd been practicing elsewhere, and then he quite enjoyed his samadhi practice, and I was getting very frustrated by being with Ajahn Chah. In fact, I remember him telling me, this was Ajahn Bankal, him telling me when he would be like looking after Luang Pa or being around Luang Pa, and he'd get bored by having to attend to Ajahn Chah's needs, and especially when there's receiving visitors, and so then he would just start to tune out and try to drop into samadhi rather than having to attend to the details of looking after Luang Pa. And he said it was really comical. He said over time he noticed every time that his mind went to go to his meditation object and go to samadhi, when he was around Luang Pa and there was other people around, Luang Pa would immediately say, Ban Kao, get me this, or Ban Kao, get me that, do this, and he got very both frustrated and amazed. But also, at one point, he was going to leave and go off to pursue more solitary practice, and he came to consult with Ajahn Chah, and Ajahn Chah's response was, well, you can certainly go back and you continue your practice there as if you wish. And he said, but he said, you go back to your cave and learn how to be peaceful there. But if you stay with me, you'll learn how to be peaceful anywhere. And that was he decided to stay. So that's one memory that comes up. Also, one of the things that say in just Ajahn Chah's emphasis on Mainaya. I mean, it's just so common, this sense of not sure, not a sure thing, uncertain, paying attention to uncertainty. That it was in yesterday's reading of the Meghiya Sutta, where the Buddha is giving these different meditation practices or techniques to asubha, to deal with lust, metta, to deal with anger, mindfulness of breathing, to deal with discursive thought, but the recollection of impermanence to deal with the I am, and that that self position or I am position is undermined, and one realizes the truth of not self through the contemplation of uncertainty, and where that doorway, the Buddha, of course, says the contemplation of impermanence, but Ajahn Chah's approach to that was through that sense of uncertainty. And I think one of the things that is really important in terms of contemplating that, because usually what we'll do with contemplation of impermanence, just as a object or as a way of conceiving in the mind, it becomes an object, and then we externalize that experience of impermanence, but by contemplating it as unsure, uncertain, changeful, then we start to pay attention to what it feels like for within that experience, and so it's much more of the subjective experience of reality, and of course that's something that Ajahn Chah emphasizes over and over again, of this sense, the language of Dhamma is the language of feeling, and to pay attention to what does it feel like, because that takes you back to, I mean, one just the experience, the reality of uncertainty and change, then taps into or highlights just that feeling of just unsatisfactoriness, and where uncertainty is really there's just this discomfort, dis-ease that we feel within this human condition, and this is an unsatisfactory condition that we don't really have the ability to exercise control over. We can put as many appropriate conditions in as possible, but in the end, there is a sense of dis-ease, and it's important to pay attention to that, because that's a catalyst for seeing seeing clearly, and for relinquishing, for letting go. So, sense of uncertainty and change. And certainly, as was in that reading, the way that Ajahn Chah ran the monastery, there was this constant element of uncertainty. You never really knew when anything would happen, if it would happen, when it would be cancelled, if it would be cancelled, if it would be. And that's just how it worked. And you had to learn how to adapt to whatever circumstance presented itself. I mean, in general, basically, you can't replicate that in the West, because it just drives people nuts.
Maybe I was doing something right. Got criticized for that a couple times.
It's just sort of the Western culture, Western mind is just so uneasy with uncertainty, and so but Wat Pah Pong, you really had to be ready to adapt and change and roll with things as they happened, and you had to be. There was a kind of a sharpness and alertness that you had to consistently be applying and honing the mind with. So that's something that comes up as a reflection. Also, I'm going to open it up and see if anybody has any questions.
Is it on? It's on. My question is about how to skillfully apply this contemplation of uncertainty, or meine, and does it apply across the board, or is it something that we have to be careful to not go too far with? For example, could we apply it to the Dhamma? Could we say, well, this is uncertain, or to the Buddha, or to this great teacher? He was enlightened, well, not certain. I mean, could it become a hindrance if we take it too far?
Well, it'll become a hindrance if you turn it into doubt. So that because what you're trying to use it is a tool whereby one can actually see the changeful nature of things, because the tendency of the mind is to try to create stability and certainty, and whether it's in external conditions or whether it's in internal conditions. It's like, I'm always going to be like this. My mind is always going to have this particular view or opinion, or this is the way I'm always going to see things, or how I'm going to always perceive things. And you realize, oh no, it is really dependent on so many conditions, and to be able to, one can take it as a, and one can always use, use the Dhamma as a weapon, either, and so like, somebody's trying to, you're trying to get you to actually commit to doing something, like, okay, today we after the meal, this is your turn for helping with dishes. Oh, my nah. Well, that's what the Ajahn says. So we can try to use it to our advantage, but that's an unskillful sort of act on our part.
Choose to not show up.
Yeah, my nah. Yeah. So it can be misapplied, but in terms of because I think one of the things also is certain recognizing that so much of the, say, the uncertainty or the unsure nature of things is also to do with our own perception. Because in terms of, say, like, is the Buddha a sure thing? Well, not a sure thing, because our own perceptions and memories and ways of interpreting and viewing are so changeful. And to be investigating that sense of well, how does that change take place? How does that uncertainty take place? And that gives you an insight into working with the mind, working with conditions. But yeah, it has to be used with wisdom.
Early on, you said, was it a hardship before happiness? There was a little phrase.
Mm-hmm.
Love it.
Right.
I use that as a new sticker to remind myself when I feel not so good.
Yes, I mean that was one of the aspects. So like Ajahn Chah was in terms, in addition to keeping things uncertain in the monastery, he was never shy at making things, a bit difficult. I mean, there's a northeastern kind of phrase or homily, sort of thing, "Magnai da yak lambak da di," and sort of the, if you want things the easy way, it'll end up difficult. If things are difficult, good can come from that. So it's a turn on the phrase, but it's sort of like that sense of being willing to to not be too afraid of a bit of hardship, because it's going against our habits and our conditioning is always going to be difficult, and having to give up our desires and preferences and whatnot is always going to be difficult. And finding ways to look clearly at that is really important.
Seems pretty inevitable
It's and the reality is you can't get away from it. Yeah, so you may as well face it.
Lupo, I had a question about something from the reading where he said there are 6 ajahns, each of the sense bases, and other than just observing like how we're reacting to the sense objects, or if we're attaching that to them, how could we use them as teachers? Like, what are ways to use the sense bases?
Well, that is our world. In the sense of what we do, observe or experience through the senses, and then how we react and respond to them out of our, either out of our likes or our dislikes or our indifference. We build our whole world through that. So being able to investigate and recognize more clearly how we are building the world, and that because oftentimes what we feel like is, the world is impinging on me, or the world is happening to me, and it's sort of. But the reality is we are sort of creating the worlds we live in, and we may as well learn about them and skillfully, study how that is, to let them be our teachers, and when we do that, then we're actually able, in a world that is out of control, there is a bit of that's where our place where we can actually affect some sort of stability or control.
Well, it's 2:20 now, so
Okay?
if there are any more questions, this is a rich opportunity, but if not, then we'll call it a close.